1. Through God's guidance, David restrained his anger toward Nabal. While fleeing from Saul, David and his soldiers came to a wealthy shepherd named Nabal. David had protected Nabal's shepherds and sheep in the wilderness. But when David needed food, Nabal not only refused it, but also humiliated David and his soldiers. David was furious and prepared to lead his soldiers to attack Nabal's family in revenge. Just then, Nabal's wife Abigail learned of this and quickly came with gifts to stop David, begging him not to act in anger. David said to Abigail, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of Israel, who has sent you to meet me today. Blessed be you and your discretion, who have prevented me this day from avenging myself and shedding innocent blood." Abigail's wisdom and pleading made David realize that God was preventing him from making a serious mistake, and through God's guidance, David controlled his anger and avoided bloodshed. 2. Encourage self-reflection, Elijah's despair. Elijah was a faithful prophet who had just fought a great showdown with the 450 prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel and had revealed through prayer that the Lord was the true God by sending fire from heaven. However, this victory angered Queen Jezebel, who vowed to kill Elijah. Elijah therefore fled into the wilderness, exhausted, filled with anger and despair, and even prayed to God to end his life. God sent an angel to bring him food and water so that he could recover his strength. Then, in a still, small voice that accompanied the mighty wind, earthquake, and fire, God spoke to Elijah, asking him to reflect on his emotions and reminding him that he was not alone, along with 7,000 faithful believers who had not bowed the knee to Baal. Through his experience of God's comfort and encouragement, Elijah realized that the anger in his heart was not isolated and helpless, but that he could calm his anger through rest and reflection. 3. Teach forgiveness, Joseph forgave his brothers. When Joseph was a child, he was particularly favored by his father Jacob, which made his brothers jealous. They planned to sell Joseph into slavery, falsely claiming that he was dead, and Joseph was taken to Egypt. After many years of twists and turns, Joseph became the prime minister of Egypt. During the Great Famine, Joseph's brothers came to Egypt for food, but they did not recognize that the prime minister was their brother. Joseph could have used his power to take revenge on his brothers for the harm they had done to him. However, Joseph chose forgiveness over revenge. He revealed his identity and said to them, "Your intention was to harm me, but God's will was for my good." By forgiving, Joseph released his anger, embraced his brothers and reconciled with them, and finally the family was reunited, with tears diluting the resentment of the past. 4. Bringing peace through prayer, Hannah's silent cry. Hannah was in pain and humiliated by her long-standing childlessness. Her husband loved her, but her pain was compounded by the constant mockery of his other wife, Peninnah, about her barrenness. Every year when the family traveled to Shiloh to offer sacrifices, Hannah would cry out of sadness and powerlessness, a pain that could easily lead to anger and resentment. But Hannah chose to turn to God. She prayed silently in the temple, pouring out her pain, sorrow, and anger in her heart to God, longing for God's mercy. The priest Eli saw her lips moving but heard no sound and mistakenly thought she was drunk, but Hannah explained that she was praying to God with all her heart. God heard her prayer and not only granted her inner peace, but also gave her a son named Samuel, who became an important prophet in Israel. Through prayer, Hannah transformed anger and tears into peace and ultimately joy. 5. Through Jesus' example, Jesus cleansed the temple. As the people were preparing to celebrate the Passover, Jesus entered the temple and saw that it had become a marketplace. Merchants were trading in the house of God, defrauding the people and destroying the sacred atmosphere of prayer and worship. Jesus was angry, but this was not a personal anger, but a righteous anger at the desecration of God's house. He took up the whip, drove out the vendors, and overturned their tables. Jesus said, "My house shall be called a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of robbers." All this was not done out of chaos, but was done with a clear purpose to restore the sanctity of the temple. Through this action, Jesus demonstrated that anger is sometimes necessary, especially when we are fighting for justice, as long as it is expressed in the right way. 6. Develop patience, Jacob's patience. Jacob fled from the wrath of his brother Esau and sought refuge in the home of his uncle Laban. There, Jacob fell in love with Laban's youngest daughter, Rachel, and agreed to serve for 7 years in exchange for marrying her. Although these 7 years seemed long to Jacob, he waited patiently and expectantly because of his love for Rachel. However, when the 7 years were up, Laban deceived Jacob and gave him his oldest daughter Leah in marriage on his wedding night. Although Jacob felt angry and disappointed, he did not give up. He was willing to serve Rachel for another 7 years and finally married his beloved wife. Jacob's 14-year wait demonstrates his persistence in love and great patience, teaching us that when faced with challenges and injustice, replacing anger with patience will ultimately bring rewards. 7. Authorization and assistance. Aaron assisted Moses in managing the people. After Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt, he dealt with all the disputes and problems of the people alone. He often felt very tired and irritable. Seeing Moses' predicament, his father-in-law suggested that he appoint wise men to share the responsibility and deal with daily disputes. Moses accepted this suggestion and decided to appoint his brother Aaron as his chief assistant to help govern the people. Aaron enjoyed great prestige among the Israelites and had previously been at Moses' side to help him, so he was an ideal leadership partner. By delegating tasks and responsibilities, Moses was able to calm down and focus on other important matters and communicating with God. Aaron's assistance to Moses in managing the people greatly eased Moses' work burden and prevented his anger. Inspired by these 7 biblical stories, we understand that anger is not our enemy, but a bridge to inner peace and wisdom. As long as we obey God's guidance and use love and faith, we can transform it into strength.